I'm Elizabeth Peña. I am the director of the Center for the Arts and Religion. I also happen to be interim dean and vice president for academic affairs. I've been at the GTU a total of almost 8 years.
And I am Lydia Webster. I'm the assistant curator at the Center for Arts and Religion here at the GTU. And I've been here since 2017.
So we're here at the Graduate Theological Union, and we're in a community of people who are studying, religious studies, theology, and things like that. So we want to, everything we're doing, we're trying to interact more with the GTU community.
The GTU people are often so thinking very abstractly about ideas or non-tangible concepts. And I think a real asset that CARE can bring to the GTU community is tangible, physical art, a way to see the numinous as something actually in front of us.
One that was particularly meaningful to me was called Religion and Resistance. Circumstances and what was going on in this country made us think about, well, there's a lot of protests that had been happening, and made us think about the role of religion in protest, and that people of faith, probably since the dawn of time, have been coming together to protest and about social justice and other issues that are important, and have moved the needle forward, right, in progress. So we wanted to see how that was reflected in both art, in sort of protest posters, but also just signs, just placards that people were carrying to protests. So they were both sort of historical from the GTU archives and current day things. And this also brings up what I was just saying about how art objects become sacred just by being in the gallery, right? By the time you put something on the wall, it attains a sort of aura. So people would say, you want that cardboard sign I made? I'm like, yeah, I really do. And so we put that on display, and it has a huge impact. It tells a whole story that's in that cardboard sign. Or a t-shirt someone made, we put it on a frame and a mannequin top and put it in a case, and so the people that made these protest objects were amazed that we wanted to exhibit them. And they would say, well, I haven't created any art. I say, well, we
think it's art. It's something that can be used to tell a story, something that has importance. And even, maybe people weren't intending to put a sacred or religious or spiritual meaning or aspect into their art, but something Elizabeth in particular is really good at is teasing out the religious aspect. So another thing that we had in that Religion and Resistance exhibition were these really amazing photographic prints by Ken Light, who's a photographer or photojournalist at UC Berkeley. And when you met with him, she said, do you have any images that represent protest from maybe like a religious lens? And he said, let me see what I can do. We definitely don't ever want to define spirituality for the artist. I think, there is an element of being able to give people a forum in which to discuss the spirituality of their art, but we would never want to be the ones to define that for them.
When we host artists in the gallery, we want to show what they want to show. Yeah. It's their show, and we're there to facilitate it and curate it by showing it at its best and organizing it in a way that tells the best story. But we're not dictating to anybody what is spirituality. The other thing is we put up the artwork, and you can't tell what the viewer is going to say. Someone walking into the gallery is going to be, find a certain piece compelling and see the spiritual in it, and maybe see a completely different kind of spirituality than the artist intended. So that's just part of the gallery is what it is because of the people who come there, and the interpretations and the thinking that they attribute to the pieces and how they feel in the space. And one of the exhibits we did was called Sacred Sounds, and this was an exhibit where we invited the Left Coast Chamber Ensemble in for a residency for a semester. The idea was that we're not only thinking about visual art, but other arts. When you walk into the gallery, you feel that it's a sacred space. It's a space apart. It's a little bit different from your everyday life. So how can we extend that kind of embodied experience using other senses? The last one we did before the pandemic hit, and we had to scurry away, which was called Afterlife. And it was an exhibit that featured art of Mark Mitchell and Ed Auerlich-Sugai. Both are artists who were affected by HIV/AIDS. Ed Auerlich-Sugai passed away from AIDS, and Mark Mitchell survived. And so we have these two different stories of these artists. And Ed did these just really beautiful, right, ethereal paintings of these kind of floating bodies. So beautiful, and it just fit really well with Mark's very beautiful work, which are garments, more garments, but floating. Well, we displayed them floating from the ceiling, and they're burial garments that he created for individuals and to tell the story of an individual. So they're very specific and very, just amazing technical handiwork and embroidery, incredible. So we displayed that, and it was just very beautiful.
Now that you say that, I don't know, it didn't ever really strike me when we were putting up the exhibition, but we did have these striking oil paintings of nude figures. And then we were also displaying the clothes for those nude figures in this kind of amazing way. The burial shrouds that were hanging from the ceiling, empty, devoid of a wearer, and then the naked forms were right there on the wall.
And we should say we had a guest curator, Ala Efimova, who's the one who organized this with the artists. But we all worked together on the how to organize it once we had the art in-house and how to put it up. And we had a panel discussion, I guess it was, with some pastors who had been really involved here in San Francisco with AIDS when it was a new thing, when it was really happening, and like how they dealt with it, and thinking about afterlife, and then when the pandemic hit, we obviously couldn't do that in person, but they were more determined than ever that it was important, because we had this other pandemic. And so the pastors who we had connected with wanted to have this panel discussion even more than ever. They just thought it was of supreme importance. And so we did do that on Zoom. That was our first Zoom thing. And it was very wonderful, actually. I think it was great.
Right. I mean, it gave them a chance to talk about the way that they had ministered back in the 80s and 90s at the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic crisis, and how resonant it was in our own 21st century times. How much, like Elizabeth just said, we were seeing prejudices rise up again, and blame and distrust and isolation. And to be able to bring us all back together around art, essentially, and hear the panelists. I mean, one panelist was moved to tears, I remember, talking about the art itself, because, the artists were similar to the same people that they had been ministering to during the AIDS crisis. They were people who'd been going through similar struggles, and, one whose life was lost to the disease. And I think that was, a profoundly moving experience for those panelists. Art in of itself can be your spiritual practice, I think, if that's where you could really feel transcendent above the everyday, or some way to be meditative or quiet, or contemplate something within yourself, then I think that's wonderful.